our last line of defense will be Link.
Link.
Why hello there, my name's Arkthepenguin, and much like grass, I've been a huge Zelda fan for a long time now, especially 2017's Game of the Year, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. Yet another Zelda game that I'm a huge fan of is actually my favorite game that I played in the year 2020, The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Both of these games bring something intensely special as pieces of media.
Breath of the Wild offers the most free video game experience you will ever have in a very serene atmosphere. Majora's Mask, while far more linear, takes you on one of the most bizarre and magical adventures you will ever go on, and provides one of the most eerie and unique atmospheres I've ever seen in a video game.
So I'm sure you can imagine my excitement when I saw the first trailer for the, at the time, unnamed sequel to Breath of the Wild. From the trailer, it seemed like it would offer both the freedom and world of Breath of the Wild, but also the atmosphere and story of Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess. But once the second trailer dropped, things became a little bit more mysterious, and even more so after the last trailer.
Will it have a more scary, dark atmosphere like the first trailer suggested? Will it be a more quote-unquote angelic type game as the Sky Islands of the second trailer suggested? Can you build the average house in Detroit, Michigan?
Well, as it turns out, we got all three, including the ability to talk to digital goat men. Yeah.
Honestly, talking about a game as huge as Tears of the Kingdom is quite intimidating. Despite the fact that I have beaten the main quest once, I only have around 65 hours in the game. So while I have spent an ungodly amount of time in this game, I have seen far from everything Tears of the Kingdom has to offer.
I actually had this game pre-ordered for me for my birthday, so I ended up getting it the day it came out, and I beat it 2 weeks later, specifically on the 25th of May. Also meaning that for 2 whole weeks I fully embraced my lack of a girlfriend. Who needs a social life when you can collect 1,000 Korok seeds?
The game opens up with what is essentially the first trailer we saw at E3 2019. And we all remember just how that trailer was. Well, I'm happy to report that the first trailer definitely undersold just how creepy this scene is. The music in this scene heavily utilizes the inverted vocals we've been consistently hearing throughout the trailers. And this rewind feature of the vocals actually gives a crucial clue to the overall story of the game and one of the abilities, which I will touch on later. The basic gist of the intro is Link and Zelda at some point ended up finding caverns beneath Hyrule Castle and decided to explore them. While in these caverns, they end up finding several murals which depict the events leading up to something called the Imprisoning War and the war itself. After by far Zelda's cutest moment in the entire franchise where she geeks out about the murals, they find that the final few murals are covered up by some rocks. At this time, there is no way to destroy the rocks without committing war crimes, so the two decide to venture further. The two find what appears to be a mummy with green glyphs spiraling from its chest. Once they get closer, Zelda takes what I initially thought to be a Tear of the Kingdom, but was later revealed to be the Secret Stone of Time. Mummydorf awakens, shatters the Master Sword, screws up Link's arm, says some creepy things, and Link fails to save Zelda from falling into the abyss. However, she vanishes into this really bright light before she hits the ground. Meanwhile, Link is about to actually fall into the abyss, but then a funny hand grabs him and he passes out or something. You wake up on a sky island, jump down to an even bigger sky island, title screen.
Right off the bat, the first thing I noticed in this intro sequence was the music. One of the most common criticisms of Breath of the Wild was its lack of traditional Zelda music, and I have to agree, especially considering that is also my biggest problem with the Angry Birds movie.
I personally love a lot of Breath of the Wild's music. However, I also think that it does lack a lot of super memorable tracks. Tears of the Kingdom is definitely better in this regard. The main theme is of a very similar quality to the main theme of Breath of the Wild, but unlike Breath of the Wild, the main theme and the title theme are completely different. In fact, you actually don't hear the main theme of the game until the last part of the credits. The main theme is very triumphant and epic with lots of trumpets and string instruments. And near the end of the song, there's a sequence that heavily utilizes those reversed vocals I mentioned before. On the other hand, the title theme for Tears of the Kingdom uses more string instruments and piano and feels more heavenly and angelic. And this diversity of music is present throughout the whole game's OST. Tears of the Kingdom's music also takes a ton of old favorite songs from Breath of the Wild and just makes them infinitely better. One in particular to point out is Sidon's theme. this is far from the only track that does this. In fact, Breath of the Wild's main theme has a rendition in this game that, for me, is on par with the original. However, the best track to come from Tears of the Kingdom isn't even in the game. And you all know exactly which one I'm talking about too. You know, that one. As much as I love the main theme for Tears of the Kingdom, I kinda wish that was the actual main theme.
Yet another thing Breath of the Wild lacked was traditional Zelda dungeons. I mean, I thought the Divine Beasts were pretty cool. I mean, before them I only traversed the insides of 3 animals? However, the puzzles, theming, and visuals were definitely subpar. So did Tears of the Kingdom fix these issues? Well, short answer, yes. Long answer, yes.
The puzzles are still not quite as good as a game like Skyward Sword or Twilight Princess, but they are definitely much better than Breath of the Wild. They simultaneously keep the freedom for solving puzzles that Breath of the Wild had, yet also make puzzles much more complex. Rather than having 50 ways to solve one puzzle, with only 1 or 2 of those options being difficult or interesting, Tears of the Kingdom has only 4 or 5 ways to solve a puzzle, but those solutions are far more in-depth and interesting. Not to mention that stupid moving the Divine Beast mechanic is completely gone. And of course, the theming is significantly better. The theme for 4 of the 5 dungeons in Breath of the Wild were almost identical to the shrines, minus all the blue. And the 5th dungeon was literally just Hyrule Castle. In Tears of the Kingdom, there are 7 main dungeons, and each is completely unique. You have a floating water temple, an underground fire temple, a desert lightning temple, a flying boat wind temple, and even a robot factory as the spirit temple.
How are those two correlated? Don't ask me, ask him. Why?
So, yeah, the dungeons in this game are definitely a step up from Breath of the Wild in my opinion. But what about the story? Is that any better? Well, I'm glad you asked.
Breath of the Wild's story was probably its biggest criticism. Many people, including myself, didn't like how much of the story was just left to imagination. Which is weird, because I usually like to leave everything to the imagination, especially friends and contributing to society. But in this case, I don't think it worked.
Rather than opting for the tell-don't-show method of storytelling, Tears of the Kingdom leaves almost nothing to the imagination. Well, for some people at least. Earlier I mentioned how the reversed vocals actually play a role in the story. These are our reference to the main plot of the game, which is as follows. Zelda is sent all the way back to the founding of the Kingdom of Hyrule, and you have to figure out how to get her back to the present. However, she appears to be in the present too, with a mysterious Zelda-looking figure roaming Hyrule. I won't spoil anything for you because my favorite part of the game was uncovering the various mysteries of Hyrule. The first is, of course, what happened to Zelda, and why does she look so freaky? Secondly, the Dragon Tears, or more bluntly put, the Tears of the Kingdom. Scattered around Hyrule, you'll find geoglyphs which contain dragon tears hidden in them. In order to find the dragon tears, I highly recommend getting some height and looking for non-hollow tear-shaped glyphs. Once you find these dragon tears, you'll be treated to a cutscene of Zelda in the past, very similar to that of Breath of the Wild's memories. And let me tell you, the dragon tears are definitely better than Breath of the Wild's memories. The memories were cool, but all they really did was add context. The dragon tears completely changed the way the story plays out, especially after the last few cutscenes.
I refuse to spoil anything, because actually experiencing it for the first time was actually where I got a lot of my enjoyment from the game. All you need to know is I beat Tears of the Kingdom with every single main quest line completed. And I've never been the same since.
When they said this game would be on the same level as Majora's Mask of Twilight Princess in terms of atmosphere and story, they really undersold it. In fact, I found that Tears of the Kingdom regularly exceeds both in terms of quote-unquote dark and sad themes. However, it manages to keep that serene and beautiful feeling that Breath of the Wild has. Instead of having just one or the other, Tears of the Kingdom combines the two. There are quite a few depressing events that take place, that use very melancholy music and visuals rather than intense. And I have to say, the sad atmosphere of Tears of the Kingdom is really what sets it apart from its predecessor. I mean, what else do you expect from a game called Tears of the Kingdom? By the way, the dragon tears aren't the only reason this game is called Tears of the Kingdom. Once again, I won't spoil it, but sad dog.
Arguably one of the most impressive parts of Breath of the Wild was its massive map. And once it was revealed that Tears of the Kingdom would be reusing Breath of the Wild's map, concern in many surfaced, including myself. Well, I'm happy to report and say that at the expense of what I assume to be a lot of friends, Nintendo managed to make Hyrule just as interesting and magical as it was before. Wait, what's that? You want more? Well, Nintendo gave us the quickest possible way to repel women, also known as the Skies and Depths.
We already knew about the Sky Islands from the first few trailers, but we had no idea just how many there would be and just how much content they each would hold. You can find balls, squares, whatever shape this is. Tears of the Kingdom has it all. My personal favorite Sky Islands include the Islands of Power, Courage, and Wisdom. They present you with these really fun skydiving challenges that are always a good time. I was also a fan of the Giant Sphere, the Labyrinth Islands, and Dragon Head Sky Island. Part of what made the Sky Islands so fun was using the Zonai technology to create devices you can use to get higher up or further a certain direction. Now, in real life, I don't think of myself as a very handy individual. But in video games... As for the depths, we had no idea that this would be in the game. Not even any hints to it. They just straight up give you a second version of Hyrule underneath Hyrule. The depths are particularly interesting because of how you explore them. The depths are pitch black, and you need to use one of the new items in Tears of the Kingdom called Bright Bloom Seeds. If you attach these to arrows using the new fuse mechanic or throw them, once they hit the ground, they light up an area. You can use these to make a path to light roots, which light up a very large portion of the area. Although this can make exploring the depths somewhat annoying, it does keep you engaged. My biggest issue with the depths is the fact that most of the mountains connect to the ceiling. What made Breath of the Wild's world so fun to traverse was the fact that you could climb literally anything. And the same is true of Tears of the Kingdom. In fact, they added new items, including an entire armor set to prevent slipping while climbing in the rain, one of Breath of the Wild's most annoying mechanics. This plus the Sky Islands makes the surface and sky the most fun open worlds to traverse in any game ever made. The depths, unfortunately, do not share the same quality. One of my least favorite aspects of open world games is having to walk around giant mountains you can't walk or ride on. This was what made Breath of the Wild so much better than any other open world game at the time. Because the tops of the mountains are connected to the tops of the depths, you cannot climb over them, meaning a lot of the time you are going to have to do those annoying walkarounds. And because the entirety of the depths is shrouded in darkness, which can only be countered with a limited number of Bright Bloom Seeds, this can lead to traversing the depths being more tedious than most other open world games without climbing. That's not to say that the depths are bad though, far from it. The depths of Hyrule offer some of the most enjoyable secrets in the entire game. You can find ancient Zonai ruins, such as the underground mines, which contain some of the coolest armor sets in the game, and the Construct Factory, which plays a huge role in the story.
You can even straight up find every single boss in the depths for a rematch. Did I re-challenge these bosses? Well, considering I'm 0-1 with my door frame, I found them and then swiftly departed. Man, I can't wait to see what Jeff Keighley thinks about this game.
Part of what made Breath of the Wild so special was all of the cool little secrets you could find. The game consistently rewarded you for exploration, which is something I really appreciate in a game. However, if Breath of the Wild gives you $1 for every secret you find, Tears of the Kingdom gives you an oil factory. The action reward system, which Breath of the Wild did so well, was improved upon significantly in its sequel, which is a monumental achievement. But the sheer number of things you can find while exploring has more than tripled, meaning that at the very least, part of the magic of Breath of the Wild has also been tripled. And that's not including the story, music, characters, locations, bosses, dungeons, mechanics, and so much more. Including those, let me tell you, it should be illegal to make a game this good. Speaking of the new mechanics, why don't we go over some of them? First off is Ultra Hand. This is arguably the most important new mechanic introduced in Tears of the Kingdom. The idea of Ultra Hand is you can build anything with the materials given. And when I say that, most of the time, if you can think of it, you can build it. I mean it. And what makes Ultra Hand even better is the auto build feature. When using auto build, you can actually recreate any structure that you previously built with Ultra Hand, and all it costs is just a little bit of Zonite. Ultra Hand is very similar to the ability Magnesis in Breath of the Wild. However, Ultra Hand is so much more in depth and allows for so many more wacky creations. I'm pretty sure some of the creations I've seen on YouTube can be considered illegal in some countries. Another very important ability that they added was the Fuse ability. Something that left me wanting with Breath of the Wild was the lack of crafting. And while it's not a full-on crafting system, Fuse definitely filled that hole. Fuse allows you to, well, fuse almost anything in the world to a weapon you have. And with this, you can make some interesting combinations, to say the least. And because of this, one of Breath of the Wild's biggest strengths, which was the weapon versatility, has now been expanded to levels that I did not know was possible. Ascend is another one of my personal favorite abilities. If you're in a place with a roof and or ceiling, if you use Ascend in that area, you will teleport right up to the top. This makes exploring the caves, yet another one of Tears of the Kingdom's new features, significantly less annoying. And the final ability I want to talk about is Recall. When using Recall, you cause individual objects to go back in time, meaning that if something has fallen from the sky and you use Recall on it, it will go right back up into the sky. This is one of the ways that you can get up to the Sky Islands. Practically, this is probably my least favorite ability, but that's not to say that Recall isn't useful. Like I said, it's one of the most common ways you get up to the Sky Islands. On top of the fact, many of the puzzles in the dungeons require Recall. Overall, every single ability that they introduced is meaningful to the story in some way, and also fun in some way. Although it was a grueling experience waiting for it, I can safely say that if the next Zelda game is of this quality, I'd honestly be happy waiting 7 years. I've thought long and hard about this ever since completing the game, but I think I've come to my verdict. Tears of the Kingdom is my new favorite Zelda game of all time. Why does that statement matter? Because I strongly believe that if you love Zelda like myself, this may also become your favorite entry in the series. Where this would place in my top 10, I'm unsure. It's more than likely somewhere in the middle. Either way, this is a game that I highly recommend to anyone and everyone. Tears of the Kingdom is a milestone, nay, an achievement in gaming, and one that I believe will change the way a lot of developers look at video games.
I absolutely adore this game and have no doubt in my mind this is gonna win Game of the Year. Actually, speaking of the Game Awards, I was thinking about Jeff Keighley, as I often do, and I was thinking about how disappointed I am that I didn't get to see his reaction to Tears of the Kingdom. Oh well, I'm off to bed.
Here to present Game of the Year, Jeff Keighley.
All right, guys, we are here to present Game of the Year. It's been an amazing night. I want to thank you all for coming out for that. But first of all, let's take a look at our 5 incredible nominees for Game of the Year.
Jeff, no, come back!